This is breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
Start really working through the board. They've done all the character work. They've done all the player evaluations, the all-star games, the pro days, and it's a hard job. Area Scouts a hard job, and our group did a really good job this year, so I want to recognize that group. Along with our national scouts and Sean Herrick, who also, help kind of get the board organized for us and again, do a lot of work in the fall, a lot of travel in the fall, supply us with a lot of information and background on the scouts, or excuse me, on the draftable players this year. And then our college director, Brandon Jurgen, who joined us here. He's been on the job here for a little less than a year. Just did a phenomenal job here this fall, did a phenomenal job in terms of the scouting piece, but really even more importantly, he did a phenomenal job in terms of the teaching piece and the education piece, and really helping our scouts continue to work to get onto the same page, continue to learn our system, and continue to evolve as scouts. And so, really appreciative of that. Our pro scouting department, who's also involved in the draft process, with their focus really being on team needs and kind of studying the league and having an idea of what some of the league trends are, team trends are amongst the other teams in the league. So we're glad for their support. Our director of scouting administration, John Barnett, who's been with us for a little less than a year, just does all things relative to coordinating travel for us. That's a Hondo. That's a fine. That's a fine. What do you want to do with that, Will?
25 push-ups.
25 push-ups at the end.
You can tweak that. 25 push-ups.
All right, we'll see that at the end here. You cut my John Barnett soliloquy short. Sorry, John. Our operations department here, phenomenal job also helping organize all the visits. Again, all the 30 visits and how that process moves throughout our building, which is, again, very valuable for us. Our trainers, our strength and conditioning staff, our player development staff, all involved in helping us through the evaluation process when we bring prospects here on site. Our nutrition, cafeteria, again, all put in overtime work as we're having people come in and out of the building throughout the month for our 30 visits and those types of things. And then our families. There's a lot of sacrifice that our families go throughout the fall, especially with our college guys being on the road, but also all our in-house people, my family included. Cam, Gigi, Asher, they want to make sure I mention their name here in front of the audience. They've been helping me. Cam has a lot of draft opinions on what we're going to do here this year as a 7-year-old. So I got to fight him down just like I got to fight you guys down. He wants to know who we're picking, where are we going, are we going to stay on the defensive side of the ball, some of the same stuff you'll be asking today. So, but just really proud, really impressed. And excited about the group of people that we have working here. We're still developing a cohesiveness as a team as we're evolving in the first year together, and really excited on where it's going. So that's all I have. I'll turn it over to you all to answer questions. We'll make Hondo go last since he disrupted this thing.
Dave, as you do kind of wrap this process up, get ready for Thursday, you got 12 picks. A lot of those are at the top of every round. Do you feel, looking at this body of players, that you're in a pretty good position to add multiple players that are going to be able to help pretty quickly starting next season? Yeah,
that's the hope. And I think when you're picking at the top, where we are at in some of these rounds, that you hope that you're able to find some guys that are going to impact the team. And, selfishly, we want to do it throughout the whole draft. But, I think we're in a good position with the number of picks that we have and where we're picking, to find some players that are going to come in here and have a positive impact on the team.
Dave, I'm sure that as the draft progresses through each round, it dictates what you were able to do, changes your strategy, right? But looking at it right now, there's no changes. It's status quo. What is the priority? What is the direction you want to go when you're looking at the 7th pick? You're not trading up. You're not. Where you're at, where's the Raiders' priority?
Yeah, I think the priority is finding someone that's going to have an impact. You want to find a starting level player at that spot. There's no doubt about that. And I think along with that, you want to find a player that fits hopefully fits a need that you have. right? I mean, we're going to look at the best available players, but we also have a lot of places on this team where we can add competition and we can add people that can help our roster. And we want to find a player that fits what we look for in a Raiders player. We want to find someone that has a passion for football. We want to find someone that is someone that has some upside, that has some explosiveness to their game, that can impact the game in a positive way, and that's going to fit our organization, I'd say, and have a positive impact on the organization as a person too. So those are some of the things that we'll be dialed in on.
That being said, what's the process like? Because we all do the mock drafts and we all have different opinions, and it always plays out differently. How many times do you guys run through it, like just a trial run, just to see how it shakes out? And, well, if this happens, then this is how we can react.
Who have you selected?
Many different players.
Yeah.
Many.
Yeah, that's a kind of when we're going through our draft meetings. We just finished up about 15 straight days of draft meetings. Those conversations are fluid as you're going through the board, you're going through different positions, you're looking back at the order of the draft and how things will fall from a strategic standpoint. And so it's I wouldn't say it's as much for us as like we're going to structure it this one day and we're going to work through a mock process. Some people do that. Ours is really fluid. I just came down from a conversation in that regard. And so it happens as you're going through the board and you're going through the positions and you start to look at the board, I'd say from a horizontal nature, you start to have those things start to pop up organically. And you have a lot of those conversations.
Is there an inherent pressure? Do you feel pressure to get it right?
Yes. I want to get 12 contributing players. And so, we put that pressure on ourselves, and I put that pressure on myself, and Josh puts the pressure on himself. And just as a scouting department, we feel that pressure in a good way, because I think that pressure drives you. It drives you when you're meeting for 15 straight days. There's a monotony that can, that you could let grow in. But I think that pressure, that motivation to get it right, that motivation to improve the team, though, that's the pressure that keeps us, keeps us pushing and keeps us focused and dialed in.
You guys brought Jimmy Garoppolo in. Does that, lessen any urgency that you might have at the top of the draft to bring in a quarterback?
Not necessarily. I think that, anytime you can find a young player at that position that's going to have an impact on your team, you have to keep an open mind to that. Of course, we're excited to have Jimmy, and having Jimmy does supply us with a very high-quality starting player at the position. And so we feel comfortable with that. But I think to close that door, and just say that that's not something you would do because of X, Y, and Z, that's not the business that we're in.
Last year in the draft, you invested your first pick in the draft on an interior swing offensive lineman. Fast forward today, sitting at number 7, you could potentially draft another offensive lineman that's very versatile, Peter Skoronski. Can you just talk about, without diving too much into valuation versus evaluation on what he brings to the table, but what you look for in the NFL traits when it comes to evaluating offensive line and in that aspect?
Sure. Well, when you talk about Skoronski and then you talk about Dylan, you're talking about two players that have multi-position versatility. And, we've talked about the value of that versatility. You only get so many players that you can take to the game. And so having players that can do different things and fill different spots, that increases a player's value. While he's played left tackle at Northwestern, you see a player that can play tackle. You see a player that has a play style that could go in and play guard too. And so so that's attractive about him. Offensive lineman, intelligence is important. Versatility is important. I also think, like, just in general, the ability to pass protect. That and run blocking is important too. But I think you have to have a certain skill set to be able to be a solid pass protector in the NFL from an athletic standpoint. And so I think that's an important trait when you're differentiating between guys is, some of the ability to pass protect.
Dave, you're a week out from the draft, and I'm curious, is all the hay in the barn? Are you still evaluating? Can there be paralysis by analysis? Where do you sit? What's your philosophy?
Yeah, I'm still working. Yep, and we'll work up until the day of the draft. And so I wouldn't say it's it's not necessarily a paralysis by analysis type of thing. It's not, hey, let's watch 4 more games on this specific player. It's more at this point we have the board in some pockets, and there's some groups of players at different parts of the board. So it might be, hey, let's take a look at these 3 players or these 4 players dive back into it. Let's look at maybe these specific traits that we're looking for that we maybe had a difference of opinion on and those types of things. So it's more of I'd say a quality control check in a focused manner at this point, rather than just kind of like, hey, let's watch all 6 games again type of thing. That's not really where we're at this point. So we're getting closer, but we'll keep kind of putting in some work here all the way up until we're ready to go on Thursday.
And I know in the past you've talked about, when you first came in the league, you were scouting cornerbacks. And I know early in the offseason you said that you felt like the secondary might be the deepest position in the draft. How much fun or just how much enjoyment have you taken in evaluating these cornerbacks and these defensive backs in this draft class?
A lot. I enjoy it. Just the athletic component of playing that position, I think is always there's is fun to watch for me, and seeing how different guys play, different matchups. In college it's a little bit different because everybody plays in a different conference. Everybody sees a different set of receivers. It's not like in the NFL where week in and week out you're seeing a number 1 or your number 2. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult. You have to be really focused in on the level of competition. But yeah, I always enjoy it. They come in different shapes, different sizes. You have guys that can only, play mostly on the perimeter, guys that can play inside and outside, more man guys, more zone guys. So I always think it's fun just putting those pieces together of the puzzle and seeing which of those types of players are going to ultimately fit best for our system.
You guys hosted several quarterbacks on visits.
Yep.
Obviously, Jimmy's going to be your starter this year, barring injury. Do you feel like you guys are in a situation where you can, be comfortable taking a player that probably isn't going to be able to play right away?
Yeah, I do, and I think it goes back just to the value of the position, and I think. And so I think that's important. I think, doing your due diligence on all those guys is important too. And I don't know, obviously we're in a position where there's a lot of quarterbacks. At the beginning of this process, you could say, hey, you don't know how it's going to fall. There's 4, 5, 6 guys that we're going to do work on and, that could fall to us or be there at 7. And so we did our due diligence because of that. But I also think, the value of that position and having a young guy, that can come in and play and contribute. We see where those contracts have gone on quarterbacks too. So there's obviously an advantage of having, someone on a quarterback on a rookie contract in terms of roster construction and those types of things. And so, like I mentioned at the beginning, I think just closing that door, I think, is irresponsible to do that.
What if you learned about Jalen Carter in this process? Do you believe it's a more complicated issue for the Raiders than it would be for another team?
No, I don't think so. For me, it's not, Adam, in terms of more complicated. I think, looking at Jalen, we looked at Jalen like every other player that's in the draft and doing our due diligence on all aspect of the player, from football learning, from practice habits, from the personal side of things, on the field, off the field, how people interact, how they interact with people, how they treat people, their experience at the pro day, combine, all of those different aspects. I don't think we want to cheat the process with any prospect in that regard. We want to hit those bases for each individual prospect. And then, of course, on some prospects, it's deeper, right? There's just more things to look at and more things to consider based on, their situation. And so Jalen, in that regard, was, similar and to a lot of players in the draft, and, feel very comfortable with the work that we've done on him.
All sorts of scenarios, trading up, trading down. Have you ruled anything out in terms of that?
No, we haven't ruled anything out in that regard, and we won't. And whether that's for pick number 7 or if that's pick 100, we'll take every pick individually, assess the situation, what makes most sense for us, instead of in terms of staying firm and picking or moving up or moving back. And so that's kind of philosophically that's how we operate.
When you're talking about that first round, sorry about that. Maybe moving up in the first round and considering some of the needs that you have, how do you does one outweigh the other?
Yeah, and I think that's what you have to weigh, and you have to understand in that situation just the landscape of the first round, and there's a lot that goes into that. Understanding the gap between, the second-rated corner on your board or the second-rate defensive tackle versus the fourth defensive tackle, or the second tight end on the board versus the third tight end on the board. What's that gap in terms of skill? What's that gap in terms of where you think you could potentially draft that player? if you're trading up in the draft, how many players could that potentially take you out of? And so there's a lot of that mechanics, and then there's some guessing to that, obviously, because we don't know. But there's a lot of those conversations that you have to work through before Thursday and have an understanding of at least what you would be willing to do.
Dave, I guess kind of follow up on what you were saying right there. It's interesting with the process of this whole draft. Is there ever a tendency to try to outthink the room? Hey, I know this guy's going to do this. I think this guy, where it could be maybe dangerous or not advisable or something, where you try to be smarter than you really should be?
In terms of what other teams may do? Yeah, I think you can. You can overthink some things, and because there is a level of guesstimation in regards to what people are in their building are thinking, and how they view their own roster too. You may feel like a team's strong at a certain spot on their roster, or like the totality of one position, the running back position, or whatever it may be, and they don't feel that comfortable, and so you can overthink and kind of guess yourself into maybe a decision that isn't the right decision at that time. And so that's why you have to take all of that with a grain of salt. And we try to do our own work in-house. We spend a lot of time on team needs. Our pro department does an excellent job, led by Dwayne Joseph, in terms of really studying the teams. That's something they do all year round, is study not only what their needs are, but what their draft philosophies are, what they've done leading up to the draft and things like that, to try to have his best educated guess on what those different teams may do. But you can't outthink yourself. There's no doubt about it. And you have to be smart in that way.
A lot of general managers, best player available, who I'm taking. Other guys say, hey, if I'm full at that position, I'll slide. What is the Dave Ziegler mentality of draft?
Yeah, I think we talked about it last year. We're focused on taking the best player available. I think where our roster's at, and our want to improve competition at every position, and that leaves us open to that. Now, I would also say, and I would caveat that by saying, when you talk about best available player, there's a lot of different things that encompass that. It's not just tape. And so it's the best fit for the Raiders. And there's different things that go into that, whether it's, the football intelligence piece, football character. There's different things that go into that, that makes that player the best available player for each individual organization. I think that sometimes can get lost. And so that's what it means for us, the best available player that's the best player for the Raiders organization and fits what we're looking for. And we're going to stay true to that process and stay open to that.
A lot of versatility between the different types of cornerbacks in this class, from Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon, and Joey Porter Jr. What are some traits that you look for in terms of starting outside cornerbacks that you value?
I think one of the big things is guys that can affect the passing game by making plays on the football. I think that's a trait that you want to see. And it doesn't always materialize in college stats, though, because a lot of guys are asked to play a certain type of way. And that's part of the difficulty in maybe evaluating the position. You may watch a guy that maybe doesn't have much ball production because they've asked him to play a bunch of cover 3 and he's playing 7-8 yards on the ball. But then when you look at his athletic traits, his short area quickness, his explosive burst, his speed, that's the level of projection that you have to make. But I think people that can make an impact on the ball is important. I think for us, we have a little bit more diversification in our coverages in terms of both playing zone and playing in some man schemes. So guys that can play man coverage, guys that you can see have a feel at the top of routes to match routes and stay in phase and those types of things. And also I'd say press technique, which is something I think you can improve on. But just a player's ability to play with patience at the line of scrimmage, ability to affect the route and disrupt the route from a man-to-man situation are a couple of the traits that we look for. And there's also the aspect I think that gets lost is tackling. You still have to be able to tackle. You get edge runs. You get, especially, the games become a little bit more horizontal, not as many vertical runs, straight down the middle of the formation. And so guys that can show up and tackle, I think that's still an attractive trait for us too.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Is there a fine line between guys who've had production in college and guys who you think have they project to be that guy? They have the potential to have that production on the next level.
Yeah, you have to be careful, and I think that's because you can project something that's not there when you project too much. And so I think you have to take all things into account too. And that's why whether it's going from the game film to maybe a Senior Bowl practices or another All-Star Games practices, or taking the combine and looking at some of the things that they were done there, maybe their ability to make plays on the ball because you didn't get to see them catch the football a lot. So you just take all those puzzle pieces that are made available to you to help in that projection, but I think it's something you still have to be careful with.
Let's go Heidi, Cassie, Chris, and Willie.
Hi.
I was just curious for you in your second year as a general manager now after last year's draft, just how much difference there is for you in the process of going through this, or how much more comfortable are you this year in that from last year to this year?
Definitely more comfort. Anytime you're the first year on the job, there's a lot of different things to get used to. Last year was the first time I had worked with our group going through this process, and now we're kind of in year 2. And so you have a little bit of a better understanding. The guys have a little bit of a better understanding of what we're looking for. So there was less teaching going on, more just getting into the nuts and bolts of the film, the nuts and bolts of the evaluation process, many more people speaking the same language and things of that nature. And so that all has led to just a more comfortable, I'd say, clear, fluid process for us. Again, the results, it doesn't guarantee any results, but we definitely feel confident in what we've done, and I feel confident in the group that we have, and the level of comfort's high.
Hey Dave, I'm
Hello.
just wondering how often, or you say your son, right, even tries to give you some of his draft picks. I'm wondering how often do guys on the current roster try to vie for their former teammates and just kind of get your ear on them? And then vice versa, how often do you go to your current players to get more insight on maybe somebody that you're interested in, to just get a different sort of perspective on that player?
Yeah, and to answer the second question, that's definitely a resource we utilize. Guys that are on our team, currently on our roster, that have played with different guys in the draft, those are conversations we're going to have during the process that we have had also. And so, yeah, it's a valuable resource because they've been with those players in a more detailed way than we have. They've seen them practice. They've seen some guys grow, throughout their time that they spent with them in college. And so definitely a lot of value in that. In terms of the players' opinions, they're all pretty. There's some that are a little bit more play scout a little bit more than others, and they're generally pretty sly about it. They're not overly overt. It's more like, hey, what did you think about so and so at whatever school, South Carolina? Hey, did you watch him? Did you visit him? Yeah, I played with him, and so there's more of that interjection from certain scouts that are on our now our 90-man roster than others. But at the same time, keep an open mind, keep an open ear, and take it with a grain of salt.
There seems to be a pretty impressive class of tight ends, and I was just curious what your thoughts are of the 2 local kids that played high school ball, that Dalton Kincaid and Darnell Washington. It might be going too deep in the weeds to have you answer that, but have you looked at these 2 guys, and what are their traits?
Yeah, 2 good football players. Again, 2 local people that have went into the college, went to good football programs too, and had success at 2 good football programs, which says a lot in itself. To go to Georgia and go to Utah and earn starting roles and be highly productive players at those 2 schools says a lot about those 2 players. Different styles of players. Obviously, Darnell's a much bigger, longer, has size to kind of be a force in line as a point of attack blocker, and he also has size and length as a receiver. And I'd say Dalton, obviously his strength has been in the passing game, and has been really productive as a route runner, and being able to get open at different levels of the field, and still developing as a run blocker. They didn't ask him to run block a lot, but he has a willingness to do that. And so, yeah, 2 impressive kids that have had great college careers that look like they have a chance of being really productive NFL players also.
Dave, you answered Vinny and Tashawn's questions about quarterbacks and saying you're not going to close if any of those guys happen to drop. And when I asked you about priority, you gave me some characteristics. Guys that can come in and start, compete, and character. Are you open to that? Means that if the right guy drops, does that mean that Jimmy G could have some competition?
Yeah, I think we're open to having competition at the quarterback position and every other position on the roster. I think that we're never going to close the door on that. Just philosophically, the way that Josh and I believe that we're going to build this roster is we're going to any opportunity that we have a chance to improve the competition, and if that means it's at the quarterback position and there's a competition there, we think that brings out the best of our players. And so I think that's why we wouldn't close the door on I talked about some of the different reasons we wouldn't close the door on that specific position, but I don't think we'd ever look at it, necessarily and say, hey, just because this one player's here at this position that we have to cancel ourselves out of, drafting another high-level player at any position on the roster.
We can do 3 more. We'll go Ed, Vinny, and then Adam.
I assume last year you and Josh were on the same page for most things, and those times you might not be. I assume you have the final say. Can you take us through something like that if you're just not on a page with whether you're scouts or Josh and how those conversations go?
Yeah, well, I'd say just through our process of how we work up to Thursday, Josh and I, spend a lot of time, the last kind of week leading up to the draft, ironing out those different things, and so we won't have a situation where we're actually in the draft room and a pick is there and we're on 2 different pages. We'll have ironed all those things out prior to getting to that point, and so there'll be some debates to get to that point on certain things, but we'll work through all that throughout. By the time we get to the draft, and we'll be ready to go.
There's been a lot of talk about this S2 test. Is that a tool that you feel is valuable and one that you guys utilize? And then also, you started your off-season program on Monday. Josh Jacobs isn't here, hasn't signed his franchise tag. Any concern with that, or do you feel like there's a path available for you guys to find common ground and work something out?
Yeah, in terms of the S2 cognition test, we're familiar with it. It's not something that we currently utilize here. We use a lot of different other available tools for us evaluating quarterbacks and other positions, different psychological tests, things of that nature that we value. So I know some what it is and some of the value of it, but like I said, not something that we currently have in place here. Was that the Josh? Oh, and in terms of Josh, like you said, yeah, he hadn't signed the tender yet, so obviously he's not allowed to, be by NFL rules, be here for this portion of the all-season program. But we're going to continue to work, through that situation. And as I've mentioned before, I'm not going to really do the contract negotiation and those types of things in the public eye. I just don't think that's responsible to do or fair to do for any of the parties involved. And so we'll just keep working through that process and see where it goes.
I was going to ask about Josh, but I think maybe on a more general level, do you think the running back scale needs to be looked at in a certain way? Like, it seems like smart teams are not guaranteeing long-term contracts to running backs because that's probably the smart thing to do. But running backs are have a shorter shelf life. They go through this grind. Like, do you think that needs to be looked at some point?
Looked at in terms of
the pay scale, I guess, in terms of maybe getting them paid sooner or something along those lines, not affecting the cap as much for running backs. Like,
that's above my That's not; those aren't the weeds that I want to get into right now. I would just say this: in terms of the running back position, obviously it's a physical position to play, and it's one of the more physical positions to play in football. Those guys take a lot of hits. They're often carry the ball and touch the ball more than other skill players and things like that. And so it's a tough position to play. And in terms of getting into the the pay scale and what it could be or should be. I'm gonna leave that one alone.
All right, well, then we'll wrap it up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, the over-under on Hondo's 25 push-ups.
0. Oh, yeah. Get on it. 0. Are we going to do it? That's all I'm saying.
The over-under is set at 1.
Like Sergeant Bilko, give me 1.
You've been watching Breaking News from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.